And we are broadcasting. Just want to wait a second for the public to connect and then feel free to proceed.
Okay. We'll just allow a couple minutes for attendees to join and then we'll officially begin the meeting. I think we can probably start. Okay, this is Chair Glenn Richards of the Newburyport Historical Commission. Welcome to the Historical Commission meeting of Thursday, the 13th of May, 2021, another virtual meeting via Zoom. Pardon me. We usually start with a roll call. Are we still waiting for Malcolm? Let's see. I think we're still waiting for one member. Anyway, well, we'll start the roll call and then we may have a member that starts late. I had to do them in alphabetical order and naturally he's the first one, Malcolm Conrad.
And it looks like Malcolm is in our audience and he should be coming in as a panelist.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Andy. All right, so Mark Syndrome, you here? Did I see you yet? Oh yeah, there you are. I see you, Mark. Can you unmute yourself just to make sure your audio is good, Mark?
Present, indeed.
Yep, there you go. Okay, excellent. Christopher Fay, I see you.
Here.
Okay. Peter McNamee. Yep, we know you're here. Saw you a second ago, and yep, there you are. And Joe Morgan.
Present.
Yep, you're here. Patricia Pecknick.
Here.
You. Myself, the chair, Glenn Richards. And let's see, we're able to get, oh, I see Malcolm's name in there. Okay. Hey, Malcolm, try unmuting yourself just so we can make sure that you can speak when you need to speak. And then you can go back on mute if you're not speaking. So to keep any noise down. He's a panelist, right, Andy?
That's correct. Yeah. Malcolm, your mic appears to be unmuted, but we don't hear you. And also, Malcolm, there is a call-in number if you wanted to try that instead, if you're having some sort of technical issue.
Okay. In the meantime, if you need to signal us, Malcolm, or something, there's also the raise hand feature, but we'll see if we can quickly get that worked out. I don't want to delay too long for technical reasons because we do have a fairly full agenda. Those of you in the Zoom meeting, a couple of just quick notes. Most of you are already familiar with this. The commissioners will have audio enabled all the time. One member of the public at a time can be unmuted during any public hearings. Of course, applicants and their representatives will be unmuted so that they can make presentations. And also, again, if they need to respond to either the board or a public at the end of the public comment period. Usually allow time for any comment at that point. If you wish to speak during a public comment period, you've got to raise your hand so we know that you want to be recognized, because we need to unmute you on our end, and you will also need to unmute yourself on your end. So look around, if you're not already familiar with it, on the Zoom controls, depending on what kind of a device you're using, that there should be a control somewhere for raising of the hand. If you're on a telephone, it's *9 to raise a hand. And there's also somewhere a control to unmute yourself. And given the nature of these devices, there might be more than one. Like the Zoom has a mute control, your computer may have a mute control, your microphone may even have a mute control. So hopefully you've got that all figured out. Okay, and then when you've done speaking and been recognized and all that, try to remember to lower your hand again, so we are all clear on who needs to speak or not. Okay, and commissioners, just a reminder, when you're either making a motion or seconding one, just mention your name. So the note taker Gretchen, who's also on the call, can capture that information. Andy Port and Caitlin Sullivan are also on the call from the planning office. That being said, I think we can move right along. We have 2 demo delay applications and 2 other applications that for advisory reports. So let's get started. First one is one continued from our last meeting. That's 7 and 9 Hancock Street. This was Eric Primack. I assume is Eric here? Let's see. Yep, he's in the attendees. If you want to enable audio, thank you, Andy. I see you've already done it. So can you put up Eric's drawings, the latest one where he made some additions? So Eric, when we left off last time, where we left off was that you were going to check out the siding issue to see if you could possibly remove the vinyl siding, which was kind of a real sticking point with several commissioners as well as members of the public who are concerned about preservation and so on. And we also wanted to get a little more information on materials issues for windows and trim and so forth. So can you tell us where we stand on all those issues, please?
Yeah, good evening. I did check out the siding, and pretty much as I said before, I mean, it's solid. I peeled back some of it. It's got a nice foam core. Whoever did the siding job did a very good job on it. The clapboard underneath, I was able to pull off a piece on the right side, and the clapboard underneath is in pretty rough shape, as I expected. It's got lead paint, and as much as I mentioned to you guys that I would still, be willing to do the siding. I'm still, I'm still a little leery on why I need to be honest with you. I get that you would like the look to be original clapboard, and I'm not against it. I'm not saying that I'm not going to do this unless I get my way, but it's in good shape. It encapsulates the lead paint. It's maintenance free. We're talking about 2 small condos, which, even in the high end of Newburyport's market pricing these days are going to be low end condos. And I think that generally people prefer to have something that's a little bit more maintenance free. That being said, if it, you guys are just dead set against me keeping the siding and you really want the clap, then I'll pull it off. But, from an economic standpoint, to pull off that siding and have it have the lead remediation paint and probably replace what could be, might only be 20% of the clapboard might be damaged, but you're probably looking at a $35,000 price tag. So, I'm not trying to claim economic hardship on this, but it's certainly a concern of mine. So the question that I had for you guys was, what is, I understand that there's, you have leeway as far as asking me to do what you want me to do, but what is, what's the precedent on this as far as, the whole front of this building? I'm not changing any openings. I'm not changing any doors. I'm literally doing nothing. The only demo delay question is on the back of the house. So I guess, I tried to look because I wanted to see if I had any, if I had any standing. Again, I don't want to make this a bone of contention, but it does seem to be a little bit onerous on your part to ask me to take off what's perfectly good, just for the sake, because I'm doing demo on that back second, on the second story.
Okay. Are you? I wasn't sure if you're finished.
Yeah, sorry. I guess, other than that, if that's, if that's the case, then, as I mentioned last meeting, I'd be willing to do it. I'm still not crazy about the idea, but I would ask that as a compromise, as opposed to the cedar shakes that are on the back, when I rip that off and put in a second story, then I'd like to do clapboard for the back section as well. So it's my preference to leave the front section as is, redo the back, and redo the back with clapboard. But I'll leave it in your hands to discuss.
Glenn, can I say something?
You may.
I'm just reading the ZBA application that I believe was approved at last night's meeting. Is that correct? And
yeah.
Says number 8 says remove all existing exterior vinyl siding and trim and restore and or replace where necessary original clapboard. And then it says remove old cedar shakes from rear section and also replace with new clapboard. So I think the ZBA permit was premised on that document that was submitted to them. Therefore, our further discussion of it.
Yeah.
Is
well, I would, I don't want to argue that point, but the ZBA, I had included that in the ZBA, but in my discussion with them, I told them that I was still going to be discussing the issue of the siding and the clap with you guys tonight. And as far as ZBA, they're only really concerned with the setbacks and the size and scope of the project. But I did mention that if you want to look in the minutes of the meeting on Tuesday night, you will see that I said that I was still going to be leaving that as an open discussion with historical on that note.
Well, to be just to clarify two things. One, as far as the specific item for the ZBA, Eric, was the upward extension of a nonconformity. That was the second floor you want to put on the back portion.
Correct.
Yeah, so that was specifically what they were looking at. And I was there, and you might recall what I told them, which was that I didn't recall anyone on this board having an issue with that particular upward extension. So as far as that goes, there wasn't any problem with the Historical Commission. However, we had some concerns about the vinyl siding, and a number of the members had expressed a rather strong opinion about leaving that there. And we also wanted to know a little bit more about the trim and the windows. So I honestly haven't read their minutes. My impression from what you said, actually, Eric, at the ZBA meeting was that it sounded to me like you either were planning to or expecting to go ahead and remove the vinyl. So that's why I think my exact comment was to the effect of, "Oh, now I'm very encouraged to hear that." So.
Oh, I do, and I said that. I said that at the beginning, that that I still would be willing to do it, but I just, I don't understand. I don't understand why it's absolutely asked of me.
Yeah.
I can't find any precedent for it.
Well,
and I was hoping you guys would give me something that showed me that. I couldn't find any other projects in recent history where you were not touching the original house and were asked to modify it.
I'm sure I could find one that just the general concept, Eric, is that I hope you don't mind me being so casual as to call you Eric.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you. Is that when as of the last meeting, there was a demo delay imposed after we voted that it was preferably preserved. So that demo delay, to avoid having to wait the year, we can review, kind of negotiate plans with the applicant, which is you, to come up with something that the commission is happy with and you're okay with. And if both sides are okay with a plan, then we can lift the demo delay and you can proceed, get your building permits and so on. It's not unusual at all for the Historical Commission to look at things. In fact, it's common, if not always, almost, to look at things beyond the specific area you're touching for demo. Like the only thing you're really demoing, I think, is like the roof in the back is coming off so you can build up, and not a heck of a lot more, right? A little bit on the side. But and there are many cases like that where someone is maybe putting a small addition on or whatever, but because of the nature of what they're doing, we either have them maybe reposition it slightly or incorporate something else to, if we think that we can get what will be an overall better result for the city and historic preservation and so on. That's very often done. I understand your point. It seems like, hey, why are we even talking about a part of the house that you're not touching? But it is fairly confident in my understanding of the ordinance that we are permitted to do that. And if the board feels strongly that this is something that should be done for the overall good of the city, the streetscape, that particular property, etc., then we can impose that. So let me turn to my fellow board members here to see if to see how people feel. I think. Oh, also, actually, before I do that, one quick thing. Thank you, Andy. Andy is showing the front view, and so Mr. Primack has added, in fact, you can see it's called out on this proposed front elevation, the cedar siding typical throughout. So I assume that's, cedar wood siding painted, as per typical, as we were just talking about. And now the 6/6 SDL, that's simulated divided light windows.
Correct.
Somewhere I saw, I'm not sure where it was now, that some of the windows existing were true divided light, but it's not clear. My memory is failing me here on that. Are all the existing windows SDL windows, Eric? And
They are.
So one of the questions that I think some of the board members had was, which, if any, of the existing windows in the part of the house that you're not affecting do you plan to replace, or have you gotten as far as to know that yet?
Most of them are in decent shape. Some of them are just a little older. I think one side of the house from the inside was done over several years back, and the other side wasn't. The owner of the house lived on the left side. He was there for a long time, and I think he replaced some of his, and some of the ones on the right side are a little bit older. Again, they're just replacement windows. We'll pull them out and put in the same things.
If they're
in bad
poor
shape.
condition, right?
Right.
Okay, just looking at this photo, I would be willing to place money that the two windows up in the attic space there are older, possibly original to the house, and the lower ones were replacements. All right, now let me turn to my fellow board members to see if someone wants to. I'm particularly interested in the opinion of the board as to, do people feel as strongly? I got the impression last week that people felt pretty strongly about the vinyl siding. Do people still feel that way? Anyone? Oh, Joe.
Yeah, I feel strongly about it. I think that all of these vinyl siding should go away, including all of the trim and accessories around the windows and at the corners. One thing that has not been talked about in relation to the siding is the window trim, the corner boards, repairing the eave. It's covered up with vinyl also at the rake. You can see it in this photograph.
Yeah.
So I think all of that scope needs to be called out very clearly on the drawing, in addition to the cedar, the new cedar siding, the clapboards. So that's substantial scope that right now is not proposed by the applicant, and I would like to see it in addition to the siding.
I did say all the trim. It was kind of a broad scope, but I did say any and all of the trim. I would include that.
I think it should be specific, though. I think you ought to say specifically all window trim, all door trim, all corner trim.
Eric,
all trim.
I don't object.
It should be called out specifically.
hang on a second. When you say, what specifically about, when you say any and all trim, well, what about it? Is it, have you, like, it looks like the vinyl siding kind of is covering up, but there's probably some wood trim. Typically there would be wood trim around the around each window. Have you been able to look to see exactly what is
I
there?
haven't. I'm assuming it's probably flat stock.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I wrote that in there as far as window trim, flat stock.
Okay, where would we find this? If we want to, is that on one of your?
I think it was in one of the like the second PowerPoint. You know, the under the list of items that I was going to do.
Okay.
If you go up to probably the second slide or the third slide, probably the third slide. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay. So this, I didn't see this earlier.
Yeah. Number 11, original windows will be kept and or replaced when needed, as well as continued throughout second floor addition 66 SDL exterior flat stock casing.
Okay. And I see number 10, restore and or replace where necessary original wood trim. Let's see. Okay. Are you seeing this, Joe? This list of items? remove all existing exterior vinyl siding and trim and okay. Keep existing side doors. All right, so yeah, I hadn't seen this. This is good, Eric.
Yep, this is
Thank you.
good. Yep, thank you. This works for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Okay, your hand is still up, Joe. You all set or?
I am. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay. Anyone else on the board want to make a comment? I know, I think it was I think Mark was here last week, last meeting, and also commented on but you don't have to, but I just wonder if you had anything further, and Peter, or maybe it was Peter or Mark wanted to say about this.
I'll stand by my comments, and I think that the vinyl siding should be removed.
Okay.
As stated in the memo.
Okay, I think we're good. Now I have to make I wonder if it's even necessary at this. Oh dear, Caitlin or Andy, do you remember if we had public comment on this last meeting? I think we did.
I seem to remember there's Stephanie Nikitich.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe we did.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
did.
And
Yes,
Tom
that's right. I remember
Kobe-John as
now.
well.
Right, because I remember Tom specifically commenting about the flat roof section and the siding. Okay, good. All right, so we did have the public comment period. Okay, Eric, thank you for providing the specifics in the memo. As you probably know already, because I know you do a lot of work in town, the planning department has a little affidavit. They have all the everyone who's doing any kind of work sign that they understand what they're being held to, as far as when you submit a plan and such as this, that you're expected to keep to that. And if you need to change something for some reason, something comes up, we know this sometimes happens, you can't just proceed and make assumptions that it'll be okay or not okay. You got to come in and to the planning office and resolve any differences where you might have to depart from the plan.
Right, I understand.
Okay, so I think we can hear a motion as to removing the demolition delay on the basis of this newly revised plan submitted by Mr. Primack. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion. This is Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Mark, I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So let me just, now while I start this roll call, if you can hear me, Malcolm, see if you can possibly get yourself unmuted so you can vote here or something. But, oops, hang on a second. But in the meantime.
I'm unmuted now.
Oh, great. And I assume, so you've heard the discussion, correct?
Yeah, I wasn't here for the last meeting though, so I feel like.
Okay. All right. If people who weren't here for the last meeting, which is several of you, I think Chris, Patricia, and should probably recuse yourself from this particular vote. So yeah, why don't we do that? I'll put an R next to you, Malcolm, for recuse. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, Mark, you were here. Your vote on this particular motion?
Yes.
Okay. Chris, you were absent, right?
Yes, I'll recuse myself.
Yep. Okay. Peter, you were here. Your vote?
Yes.
Okay. Joe?
Yes.
Morgan? Okay. Patricia was absent. I'll put her as a recusal, and the chair is also a yes. Okay. So it's a vote of 4 affirmative votes, which carries the motion. So I'll inform well, they're here. Caitlin and Andy are listening to all this. But anyway, I will formally let them know that the demo delay can be lifted on the basis of your revised plans, Mr. Primack.
Thank you very much.
And we appreciate you your cooperation on this. And I realize, we're aware that it's going to add cost to your project, and we're not insensitive to that. But on, well, hopefully in the end, people will understand why we're being persnickety about it. Okay.
I get it. I'll make it look nice.
Okay.
I
Very
promise.
good. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Meeting agenda. 5 Park Street. That's a little itty bitty street between High Street and Harris, I believe. And in number 5, the applicant is seeking to demolish an existing single-family accessory structure, in other words, a garage of some sort, and reconstruct a new one in a conforming manner. By conforming manner, this means conforming to the various zoning restrictions as far as setbacks, height, and so on. So we need to do the usual considerations, determine whether the existing structure is historically significant, and whether it should be considered for preservation or not, either of those. And then if we deem it to be significant and considered for preservation, or preferably preserved, I should say, then we'll need to go into the demo plan and have a public hearing and all of that. So let's see, who is this? I believe this is the applicant represented? Yes, but by MTC, who is speaking for are they presenting for the applicant, the attorneys?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street. With me this evening is Scott Brown, who's the architect on the project. And we're here on behalf of Boston North Development, who is the contractor for the owner of the property. If you can go to the next slide, please, Andy. This is, as the chair suggested, this is what we believe to be a later added garage on the property. Want we be very, very clear, no work is proposed on this beautiful single family 1844 structure, which we provided to you the Newburyport Preservation Trust overview on. We're requesting that the commission determine that the garage is neither historically significant and therefore not preferably preserved. The garage could be built around between 1914 and 1952 because of what the insurance maps say. However, the location of the outbuilding on the 1952 map doesn't appear to be the same as exists today. And then we provided the assessor's field card, which would indicate that it was in or around 1970, but we think it was earlier than 1970 for sure. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here's the site plan. This property is located in the R3 zoning district in the downtown overlay district. You can see underneath the red is the proposed new structure, and underneath that is a dashed line of the existing smaller garage that exists at the rear of the property, adjacent to the house and in between the sideline. So if you go to the next slide.
Pardon the interruption, Lisa. I think Malcolm, there might be some noise on your line. So if you can mute yourself when you're not speaking, that might help. Thank you.
So here's as the chair indicated, Park Street runs parallel to State off of Harris and in between High and Harris. Here's the 1851 map. You can see the existing single family structure. There's no outbuilding on this map. Next slide, please. And then here's the 1872 map. Again, this lot now exists as it does today, but there's still no outbuilding on this insurance map. Next slide, please. Similarly, here's the 1884 map, no outbuilding. Next slide, please. And here is the 1888 map, and there's no outbuilding. Next slide. Here's the 1894 map, no outbuilding. Next slide, please. 1900, no outbuilding. And 1906, no outbuilding. And again, 1914, no outbuilding. And then there appears on this 1924 map that had some later edits, but there is an outbuilding at the rear next to pretty close to the property line. These are certainly not all scaled, but they were pretty good. So it's pretty close to the property line. And the next slide, please. And here's today's My Maps, the assessor's map. It's close to the property line, but not as close as it appeared before. It's small. So therein lies the issue. But then we do have photos of construction. So if you could go to the next slide. So here's the interior of the garage. You can see the materials that are used. Next slide, please. Again, another angle of the interior of the structure. Obviously, there's a cross beam there to help with stability. Next slide, please. And just some other indications of the work that was done on the garage. Next slide, please. And the roof structure. And next slide, please. And then we have an exterior front elevation. And next slide, please. And then a side elevation. And so what I'm going to do is turn this over to Scott and let him go through what he is proposing to do. He's actually, I believe, been on site and looked at the barn, so I'll let him give you a little more detail on the condition of the materials in this garage.
You think, excuse me, Ms. Mead, do you think that would help our determination as to historical significance?
The materials?
No, what Mr. Scott is, or rather Mr. Brown, Scott Brown is going to talk about?
I do. If you go back to this, I don't want to move down to the proposal yet.
Okay, okay.
So I know you want to make these two different determinations before we get to the proposal, right? It might not even be necessary, but I would like Scott to talk about, he's been there, and so he can talk about the materials a little bit more. He would have more knowledge in that area.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Could we just go back to slide 14? Here we go. So, as far as I can tell, I don't think that this structure is particularly old. It looks like, the sheathing is, sort of a southern yellow pine beadboard. The framing is fairly clean looking. And, so the dead giveaway to me is that this thing is actually sitting on a concrete slab. So my best guess that this is, sort of at its oldest, early 20th century, could have been built in the 20s. It could also have been, I've seen structures that, look just like this from a framing standpoint that were built in the early 40s. So I think it's a little bit difficult to date, but I don't think it is that old. And if we could just go to slide 20. So this is my proposed, front elevation of what we're planning to do here. And so, the source of the inspiration for this design was another garage that I designed about 10 years ago at 290 High Street. And the garage at 290 High Street, it's a fairly prominent garage that a lot of folks really like. And unfortunately, at the 11th and a half hour, I wasn't able to find believe it or not, a photo of what we did there, but perhaps some of you folks might have a mental image of that. So, this is the next generation of that. The Seamuses, the owners of 5 Park Street, approached me and wanted to do something similar to what we did at 290 High Street. And this one is designed to meet the accessory structure requirements of the zoning bylaw, meaning that it has to be no larger than 24 feet by 22 feet by 15 feet tall. This one's slightly smaller than that, and it's also slightly smaller than that garage on High Street. And the box of this is 22 feet wide by 22 feet deep, and comes in just under 15 feet as measured to the median roof height. It does have a couple of small shed dormers. Both these dormers meet the city's requirements for dormers, meaning that those cheek walls there need to be set back from the front and back of the main box. Also, those side walls, as shown in this drawing, need to be set back from the wall below at least 18 inches, and we've certainly done that. So these dormers do create a little bit of space above the garage. And this will be accessed via an open stair on the back. And if we could just slide forward to slide 22. There we go. So this is how we're getting to that snug space above the garage, via this open stair. you know, this garage is going to be built by the same hand that built that garage on High Street, Ben Perez of Boston North Development. And so we are planning on a high quality project using the finest materials here. And I fully expect this to be a fine complement to what I think is an excellent Greek revival home that is immediately adjacent to this. And so with that, I'll hand it back to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So if you can go back up to slide 19, that would be, or even 18, please. So the request first, of course, to the board is that, in fact, to make a determination that the building is not historically significant and therefore can be removed. And that's it for right now. Is anybody there?
Glenn, I think you're muted.
Duh. Thank you. Fortunately, I haven't really said much of anything yet. So let me turn first to the board for to hear your impressions. Does anyone care to opine as to the? I know a couple of board members have often expressed opinions on accessory structures, of it, this being an example of one. You know, as an aside, Scott, I have a garage that's built on a concrete slab at my property, and I think it's late 19th century, just FYI. But anyway, but the other, I don't really disagree with your overall comments about, particularly given the nature of the way it's framed and so forth. I think it could be, well, it's hard to say. I mean, it's also looks like they used whatever scraps they had around almost for sheathing. I mean, you wouldn't normally use beaded board for sheathing and so on. But anyway, I digress. So panelists, so I'm not panelists, board members here, what do you think? Does this appear to you, given the I mean, it's automatically considered as we should decide whether it's historically significant based on its age, I think. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. We can take into consideration both structural elements in terms of condition, in terms of structure, in terms of design and architecture, and also whether or not any notorious or famous events took place here. Which I don't think happened in this particular case, that the latter. So what do you think? Anyone want to express an opinion, or even make a motion if you feel you want to jump to that? Peter.
I'm ready to move to make a motion. I don't know if the other commissioners want to deliberate at great length on it. Okay.
Well, what we can do is why don't you make the motion, and if someone needs to say something before rather than second, someone will either second it or have something to say. How's that sound?
Okay. So correct me if I don't get this right, but I move that the property is historically significant, but not considered for preservation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'll second that.
That sounded like, was that Malcolm?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Okay, so the motion is that while the structure in this case, not the house, the accessory structure is historically significant, it is not considered for preservation. It's been moved in second.
Glenn, you appear to be frozen.
And then frozen?
There you are. You're back.
Oh, okay. Mr. Carnwath, your vote on that?
I seconded it. I agree with Peter.
Okay, yeah. Since you seconded, I would assume that probably would have been your vote. Mark Sandron?
Yes, on the motion.
Okay, thank you. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
I guess I'll vote no because I don't think it's historically significant.
Okay. And Patricia Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay. Fix this. And the chair is willing to vote yes as well. Okay. So you heard that Attorney Mead and Scott Brown. So as I understand the ordinance, that means that you're not required to go through a public hearing of your demo plan. It looks, I hope you do stick to the plan you've got here. Hey, Andy, could you just go to slide 20 for a second? Just want to have a quick question on that. Looks like I think we all can pretty much agree that the overall result is going to be an overall improvement to the property in general. I was just curious, Scott, did you, I noticed you've got the, those, I assume they're like pilasters or something there, the 3 column like things in the front. Were you trying to kind of capture that Greek revival spirit with the outbuilding as well, that kind of go along with the house? Is that the idea here?
Yeah, that's the idea, sort of trying to make it a very sort of classical front facade. And, you know, also I think it's really nice when you can project those out and set the garage doors back a little bit. So which is what those columns are, you know, it's one of the side benefits of putting those columns on there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But okay. All right.
Very,
well, very
very
good.
formal design.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks very much. So you're free to go, so to speak. And unless you or any of you have any questions for the board before you take off?
No, I think we're all set. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Mead. Okay, very good. The agenda again, the next 2 items are requests for advisory review, although they're each has its own, they're 2 different things, which I will explain when we get into them. We'll take the first one. That's 21 Pleasant Street. Anyone who's been in town more than a minute is probably familiar with Pleasant Street. That's the one that where the off State Street, where the Cumberland Farms is, and the famous Unitarian Church and so on. So this is very much in the downtown overlay district. So the rules of the ordinance regarding the downtown overlay district apply. The applicant has got some of you may recall the Szechuan Taste, I believe it was, restaurant was in this location, if I'm not mistaken. And they have a project about relocating the door. So without me saying anything else for now, before I do want to say something else actually, and that's to that, since we do have some new members, I rechecked the ordinance just to make sure I had this straight. So what on a DOD permit, almost anything requires a special permit, and the granting authority is the planning board. So that's sort of similar to, you might recall, 93 State Street. That was the Institution for Savings. So there, the planning board had to decide whether to issue a special permit. Now, the role of the Historical Commission is we have 30 days. And what we're supposed to do is complete, and I'll read from the ordinance here, no later than 30 calendar days after we've received a complete application, the Historical Commission shall submit to the SPGA, that's the planning board, its written report, historical report, close paren, regarding the significance of the historic building or structure proposed for demolition and the relative importance of such historic building or structure to its setting within the DOD. Now, this is one of several inputs that the planning board then takes into consideration. Those of you who've been around any longer than a month or 2 should be kind of familiar with this. So that's our job here, is to give the planning board some advice from a historical preservation perspective, adherence to secretary standards, which the planning board is required to apply, and so on. Give them our take on this particular project and how it's affected by all those rules. So now I'm ready to turn it over to whoever is going to speak for the applicant. And who will that be? I didn't make a note of who's speaking for the applicant here.
I believe we have James, Joshua, and Matt.
Okay, is that James Trengese?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you to the board for hearing us. My name is James Trengese with True North Construction. We're the construction management firm overseeing the proposed development. So just jump in quickly. First slide is a Google Map image of the space. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides are some older historical photos. They don't give great detail of what we're looking for, so maybe we can skip to slide 5. Okay, so here you can see an older photo. Actually, what we're proposing to do here is right now the entrance to 21 Pleasant is, if you're facing the building on the right-hand side, we're looking to center the door in the opening. If you can skip down 1 more slide, please. Yep, so this is exactly what we're looking to do. Next slide, please.
Before you go, can you go back 1? So just so everyone understand, that door that says professional building 21, that's not the entrance to your store, right? That's the entrance that goes upstairs. Am I correct?
It's the opening to the left where the woman's standing, right?
Right. That's the opening to your space, correct?
Yes.
All right. So, right. The other one doesn't go into your space. Am I right?
Correct. Yes, correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everyone kind of understood that, because where it's way off to the side, it's easy to miss. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, understood. So here's just a shot of, so here you can see, this is the door right now in the opening. There's a recessed opening in the storefront. The entrance is to the right, which kind of creates an awkward entry into the restaurant. So what we're looking to do is simply shift that door to the left. Next slide, please. So where this glass pane is right now, there's a fixed glass pane with an air conditioner above. We're looking to shift the door into that opening, remove that awful looking air conditioner, replace that piece of plywood with a fixed window to match to the other 4 windows on the sides. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Next slide, please. Another existing photo.
So in essence, it sounds like you basically want to put the door back where it was previously, pretty much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
If you skip down to slide 13, you can see a proposed view. So taking that door and shifting it back where it was. Same style door. Maintain the appearance of the storefront, same color. You know.
Okay, so, same style as which? As the door to the right?
Sure. Yep.
Is that what you meant? Okay. I didn't know if you meant the same style as the door that's there in that spot, or the.
I believe they're very similar in appearance.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
Just for my clarification, is the door still going to be recessed?
Yes. Yep. We're not looking to move the door forward. The door will still be recessed. All we're looking to do is just relocate the entry. So when you walk in, you're walking into the center of the restaurant, as opposed to kind of walking in this awkward alcove where you have to turn left, then turn right, then turn right again when you walk into the space.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that. Yeah, so Mark, to answer your question, so in other words, another way of saying that would be that the door is going to be precisely where that window is now. You're not moving it either in or out. It's not in that same location. So the only thing is changing, instead of a window, there'll be the door, and above it, instead of an air conditioner and a window, will be those two fixed windows. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks very
Glenn,
much. Yes.
Glenn, could I ask just a quick question? I'm confused by the slides 2 and 3.
Okay.
That doesn't appear to be the same building. Is it a perspective that I'm not catching?
They are perspective, yes.
So what perspective is that taken from? Because I see the transom windows, or the whatever they're called, down at the sidewalk level. I see steps going up into the first level,
Yeah,
none of which exists in the pictures of the current building.
yeah, this is a.
If I can jump in, I believe the entrance we're talking about is under that big awning there in the center of that.
So we're looking down Pleasant Street here?
Yeah. Well, we would be if that's the case, but I think I see steps going up in the 5th bay from the corner there. I mean, and the windows.
Oh, thank you.
Don't really match either. I don't think that's the same building. Not that it really matters one way or the other, I suppose, but
You know,
for the
I'm
question at
wondering if
hand.
it is, because also I'm looking at the windows, the fenestration looks quite different. Your building has those, you know, like, what do you call those? The lintels, the lintels over the windows and things are rather different. What's slide 3 show, Andy? Oh, that's the same building we just looked at. Yeah, this is definitely the same one we were just.
So on this one, you can see the steps very clearly in that 3rd bay. I had it wrong.
Yeah, 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 because the shadow of the pole clearly shows the stairs. Yeah, I wonder about this, because when you go down, what's the next slide, Andy? Can you? Okay, yeah, here you see quite different fenestration. Now, of course, the building, okay, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of narrow windows, and then another building which is now no longer there. That's, I believe that is the kind of the gap between where this property is and the old Cafe Commune would have been a little bit further down to the right. Is that kind of gap between the buildings? So at least we're definitely, this is the right building for sure. But I would, Peter, I would tend to agree. I would have my doubts about what's shown on slide 2 and 3. Are you guys sure that that's the same building?
I definitely could have made a mistake there. I found those online. I was looking up the old Dodge building, and you know, I put Pleasant.
There may have been
I
more than
don't
one.
think it matters to the application.
It doesn't really.
But I just, if there was a point behind them, that I wanted to know that. But if there isn't a point behind those 2 pictures, we can disregard them.
Yeah, and now that the applicant has said that, I think there was more than one Dodge building. I think there was another one down on like Merrimack Street. So it's quite possible that that might have been what we were looking at there. But in any event, so but here we are looking at the right building. And just a side comment, there was quite a bit of, in some cases, things don't entirely match in terms of what we ended up with after the urban renewal efforts of the late 70s and early 80s, mostly mid to late 70s, where things were, a lot of these buildings were rehabilitated. And if things were in bad shape, as many of them were, some of the stuff was redone. So the current windows, at least on the first floor, may have been redone and so on. Okay, so I guess we've beaten that one to death. Typically, well, let me first ask, does the board have any question for the applicant on this? It seems fairly straightforward, but I don't want to make any assumptions. Any other questions from my fellow board members? I'm not seeing any hands or anything. All right, what I typically do in a case like this is allow a brief public comment period. If there are members of the public who would like to make a comment during this period, please do raise your hand so you can be recognized, and we'll open a public comment period as per usual. If you're going to make a comment, we'll unmute you. You'll need to unmute yourself. You'll also need to identify yourself, name and address, and then a brief comment, 2 minutes or less, if you would. So public comment period is open, and we'll just give a few seconds to see if anyone actually raises a hand. I'm not sure we have many people that are sitting in the balcony, so to speak, at this time.
You know, takers at this time, Chair. We also, as you noted, I think our audience is primarily composed of applicants.
Yeah, looking that way. Okay, I'm comfortable closing the public comment period. That looks like we don't have any on this. So let me turn back to the board. Well, the so we what I would propose is, my thinking is that we could issue a fairly brief advisory report to the planning board that we've reviewed the application and that the changes that you plan to make would not have an adverse impact on either the structure, the streetscape, the neighborhood, or the historical value of any of all of the above. That's kind of my take on it at the moment, but let me, since I am not the whole commission, let me ask the commissioners if you agree with that assessment.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, because this should be the opinion of the board, not just the chair.
Yeah,
I agree.
Sounded like Malcolm agrees. Anyone else have a?
Yep. Chris, I agree.
Chris? Yep.
Likewise, Peter.
Okay. All right. So
I
it
agree with
sounds like,
that. That sounds good. Yep.
I think it's unanimous.
yeah, sounds sounds like it is. All right. So let me just make a note. Okay, there was no public comment. Well, thank you, James. So we had our discussion. I'll just make a brief note here now.
Thank you, board.
So what I'll do is I will send off to the planning board, who will the ones that will need to give you the permit, or an advisory or a historical report from the historical commission that we do not see an adverse impact from your proposed project. And I would imagine that they would probably give you the permit unless they have some other concern that I'm not aware of.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very
You're
much.
quite welcome. Thank you for coming in, and good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Just give me a second here. I need to make a note. Okay. Then, okay. The next and last major item here is another advisory review, 276 High Street. This is similar but different. We need to compose a report for the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals is the Special Permit Granting Authority, SPGA for short, on special permits allowing demolition under the Demolition Control Overlay District, or DCOD ordinance. So what they're planning to do has been determined to falls into the definition of demolition and requires this. So and for the sake of those who might not be intimately familiar with it, I'll again briefly read a quotation from the ordinance. In this case, it's no later than 20 calendar days after the SPGA, in this case, that's the zoning board, has received a complete application. The historical commission, now in this case, it says may submit a written report, which is interesting. It doesn't, so maybe it's a requirement, but anyway, submit a written report regarding A, the significance of the historic building or structure proposed for demo, B, the relative importance of such historic building or structure in the context of the block where such building or structure is located. So it's both the significance of the building itself and its importance in the context of where it's located, the larger context. And before acting on the application, the special permit application, that the SPGA will consider both conditions reports. Those are reports from the applicant, and I think some of those are included in their submission and in our report. So I believe this is another MTC represented case. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa Mead, again, for the record, Mead, Tellerman, Costa, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. With me this evening is Scott Brown, who's the architect on the project, and Aaron Sturgis, who is the historical building expert on the project. Also with us this evening is Christopher Gusa, who is one of the owners of the property. And if you can go to the first slide, Andy, please. So as the chair said, we're here for review under the DCOD, and we don't propose to technically or literally demolish the barn. But when you move the barn on the site pursuant to the definitions under the ordinance, it's considered a demolition. We do propose to remove portions, later added portions to the barn, but we're not certainly not demolishing the barn, rather moving it on the site. So just to add some background, and when we're going to place it back on the site where it will be completely conforming as well. We are not proposing any work on the single family structure. You can go to the next slide, please. So I think it's important to look at the history of this outbuilding. The outbuilding is listed as contributory along with the main structure on the district data sheets. We believe the barn dates to about 1850, but as we will discuss in a little bit, had some later added additions. The entire property is absolutely a fabulous piece of property on High Street. It's 18,974 square feet, where 10,000 are required, and it has 90.5 feet of frontage where 90 are required. So it's a completely conforming property. And as I noted earlier, the barn is currently located just a little bit over the sideline setback on the southerly lot line of the property. So I'm going to give you a little history since that's the whole point of your determination or advisory report. So the barn, as we said, under the district data sheets, was built around 1850. And in a little bit, we're going to go over the Sanborn maps. In fact, why don't I just take us to the next Sanborn map? Andy, if you can go to the next slide, please. So this Sanborn map is from 1900, and you can see the location of the barn. We'll just stop here for a second because I want to give you a little back history. In 1849, the then owner of the premises was Thomas Emery, who was also owned the adjacent parcel of land and deeded land now known as 276 High Street to Edwin Grosvenor, who was a physician. There's no indication in the deed at that time that there were any buildings on the land. In 1863, by the time Grosvenor, and I'm pronouncing that wrong, so I apologize to any of his relatives, conveyed the property. And by that time, of course, Newbury and Newburyport had split into their separate communities. Grosvenor died, and his estate then conveyed via a will to Henry Merrill. This deed then includes reference to the buildings plural on the property. So we figure that it appears as though they were built between 1849 and 1863, hence the date on the district data sheets of 1850. The property was later added to by a further conveyance of another portion of land owned by Rufus Emery, the grandson to the aforementioned Thomas Emery, to Henry Merrill. The property remained in the Merrill family from 1863 until 1917, when it was then conveyed to Edith Bartlett. This is one of those properties that are fewer and fewer in the city of Newburyport that have had very few owners from the beginning. Indeed, a member of the Bartlett family continues to reside in the house. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here we have the 1906 map, and you can see there's a little addition on the back. And then the next slide, please. And you can see there's a little bigger addition that's been added to the back of the barn in 1914. And the next slide, please. And this is the 1924 City Assessors Map. We have an addition on the side, as well as the additions on the back. So that's kind of the progression of the additions based upon the Sanborn maps that we have. So it's clear that the barn over a number of years has undergone several transformations by the addition of sections to the south and to the east. If you can go to the next slide, please. And here we have the current condition today. You can see in this GIS map, you can see the later added addition on both the side and the rear of the structure. And when we show you photographs in a little bit, you can see that much clearer and much more distinct. So I'm going to do an overview of the conditions, but then I'm going to turn this over to Aaron, who has done a significant review of the structure itself. So if you go to the next slide, please, Andy. So as I noted, the barn had 2 significant additions since its original construction. The 10-foot wide addition to the right side gable, as you view it from the driveway. And Aaron can talk to you a little more detail about that. And a second addition along the back eave wall of the original barn. And Aaron's going to talk about their conditions. The barn sits on stone and brick partial foundations that are crumbling, and the first floor framing has been greatly altered, with little remaining from the original structure. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to turn this over to Aaron at this point before we get into the historic photos to talk about really the current condition of the barn.
Great. This is Aaron Sturgis with Preservation Timber Framing out of Berwick, Maine. Thank you for having us tonight. It's one of my favorite things to do is save carriage barns on High Street in Newburyport. So this one is a gem, but it has been altered over time. The historic photographs that you'll see next will show that. But as a precursor to that, I looked at the barn extensively at Chris Ragusa's request. It was very, very apparent that the additions were later than the original structure. The original structure is fully timber framed. Unfortunately, when the add additions were put on, they did compromise the timber frame structure, and there are structural repairs to be done. But they're relatively straightforward. It is a light timber frame, but it is fully mortise and tenoned, and very, very nicely done. The issue moving forward is that the side addition and the back addition are not on foundations. They're not on slabs. They are simply on concrete blocks of some sort. And even the side addition, the most recent one, is below the floor level of the original structure. It's actually kind of right on the ground and therefore very deteriorated and definitely having an impact on the original structure. So it was my recommendation to remove the later additions and restore the original barn. If we go to the next slide, Andy, we'll see the original form of this barn. And you can see that it is a shorter barn. It has 1 garage bay, and you don't see any of the additions, although there might have been a small one to the rear of that. And the next slide, Andy. Here you see the addition to the right. So this is, 1920 from the photograph, and you can see it changes the form of the barn dramatically. You can also see the level of the door being quite a bit lower than the driveway in the original opening. And so it's hard to see from this historic photograph, but there'll be a later photo that shows the distorted roof line as well, which is an indication of the damage that this particular addition, being less well built, is impacting the original structure. Go ahead to the next one.
Is that a cupola? Oh, okay, I guess you can see it
Yes,
now.
it is. It is very much a cupola. That photo, this photo shows that cupola. It's a decorative cupola. It appears to be early. It's certainly over the original form. When you go back to that first slide, it is apparent, but this one shows a little bit better. So you see here how the driveway drops down, and you can actually see grade in this photograph, how low it is on the right side. So that section is the latest section. In the rear piece, you'll see in my photographs in this document to show the back addition and the condition of that as well. But understand that we have an original timber frame structure. It's not uncommon for these buildings to evolve over time. We all know they did to suit the purpose of the day. But we also know that later structures weren't as well built as sometimes these earlier ones were. And they definitely had an impact on this building, and it is structurally compromised. And we propose to repair it to its original condition using in-kind materials and so forth. But
wonder-
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Okay, I wonder how big that little sprout of a tree in the front is, if it's still there, how big it is today.
Yeah, well, they certainly have an impact too, Glenn. Next photo, please, Andy. Okay, these are current condition photographs. We're looking at the back L, which you can see is on cement blocks. You can see that the roof lines are pretty, they're different than the original structure. They're different materials, they're later materials. So as you look left to right at the top row, you're looking at that back addition. And it's really not on very much. You can see right under it. So it's really pulling on the original foundation, although the original foundation is compromised as well. The photo on the lower left is just straight on to that back L. When they put that back L on, and I'm not sure that's 1925, I think that might even be a later rendition of the 1925 L, because it's just really not well done. That it's like 2x4 rafters, so on and so forth, even lighter than the Park Street frame. And unfortunately, they did compromise the back wall of the original frame by cutting out a few studs, all of which can be repaired and certainly be restored to its original form. The last picture on your lower right shows that height difference. The floor system is at the top of the concrete ramp in the door in the center of the structure. And there's basically a dirt floor on the right, and the framing to the right where that door is just right at grade. It's really not on any foundation whatsoever. So it's a little bit hard to see in this photograph, but if you look closely at the roof line, you'll see a hump right at the end of the gable. So in actuality, that addition, that most recent addition, is sinking and pulling that gable away a little bit. All of which, again, is relatively easy to repair because it's a great timber frame structure. But removing it is prudent, not only for the original form, which is the intent that Chris is putting forth, but also because it's just so poorly built that it doesn't really add to the structural integrity of this particular form and this structure.
Quick question, Mr. Sturgis. In this picture, Andy, could you kind of zoom in on that one in the lower right? It shows the two, the front view, so to speak. I was just wondering, thank you. The original, did the original structure, obviously, the right hand end would have been, around near where the right hand side of that ramp, right? So the right hand door would not be there. Did it go all the way over to that small door on the left?
Yes, that is the original form, and the earliest picture that, if you look closely, well, actually, you can't see the door in the original early picture, but yes, the original form, Chairman Richards, is in fact to the right of the ramp and all the way to the left.
Okay.
And in fact, that gable end, that original gable end, still contains the sheathing and everything else. That they simply added a bunch of 2x4s to the outside of the gable, didn't take into account any floor level issue. They're definitely lower. I think they just needed the additional space for another car. You'll also notice that the garage door is smaller. And so they actually put in a smaller door than it was originally in the original door opening as well. So it's been altered for for automobiles, and that's not uncommon. But it's a real diamond in the rough. Again, you're seeing a form that is not true to its original aesthetic, and I think the idea is to regain that by restoring the original timber frame.
Did I understand you correctly? So it sounds like you're saying between those two large garage doors, there's still old sheathing.
Oh,
inside.
Absolutely. The original gable is fully intact. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yep, they primarily removed in the back L, they removed some eave wall studs, but they did cut one of the structural posts off halfway to gain entrance to that back L, but that's all repairable. And we would repair that in kind and regain the structural integrity, but also the aesthetic of that timber frame. That makes sense? Yeah.
So Aaron, could you also talk about the fact that the idea here is to give the barn a much longer life by putting it on a brand new foundation versus what it is today.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. You can see grade is very high around this building. It did not have a significant foundation. And moving it and putting it on a new foundation will enhance its integrity, both structurally and longevity wise. There's really not much of a foundation under this structure overall, but it gets poorer and poorer as the additions were added. And that's really not uncommon for a carriage barn. They weren't necessarily designed to as strongly or with full foundations like the beautiful house has. But moving it back onto a proper foundation will make all the difference in keeping this barn intact over the long term.
So thank you, Aaron. And of course, the commission can ask Aaron any questions he wants later on as we go through this presentation. So I think we just addressed all the issues that were on item 15. Andy, if you could go to slide 16, please. So the proposal is, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott right now, the proposal is to build a new foundation for the barn and move the barn to a new location on the lot that better serves today's functions, but preserves the barn. So Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Lisa. So we're, we've positioned this in the back left corner of the lot as you face it from High Street. And as already mentioned, we've positioned it in a spot that meets the zoning setbacks. We've oriented so it is parallel to the house. And we've positioned it in a place which, gives us maximum flexibility to make use of the backyard. As Attorney Mead already stated, this is a great yard and it's lined with massive mature trees, which really give it a nice sense of privacy. And unfortunately, the current position of the barn hinders one's enjoyment of that yard from the perspective of being in the house. So locating it to the back left corner is certainly going to open things up from being in the house. Next slide, please. So these are existing condition elevations. A lot of this sort of Aaron has already covered, but really what we're trying to do here is clearly indicate those areas that we are proposing to remove. The front elevation is in the lower right-hand corner. And right there, we're indicating that third bay, which Aaron spoke about, that we're proposing to remove. And the other three elevations indicate, those later additions that we're proposing to remove as well. Next slide, please. So these are our proposed elevations. The proposed front elevation of the barn is in the lower right-hand corner. And again, you'll notice that we're returning the overall box to its original size. In the lower left-hand corner, we're proposing a door, more or less in the same location that it is now. On the right side, we're proposing a larger utility type door, more or less in the same location it is now. Front elevation, we're showing some rooflets, that have metal on them. Covering those doors. I think anytime that you can provide a little bit of a cover over a door, it certainly prolongs the life of it. The other three elevations on the sheet, if we could just zoom out a little bit. Other three elevations on the sheet show this addition that we're proposing off the back. You'll note that it has a very simple shed roof. That shed roof is coming under very cleanly under that existing eave line. We've set both sides of this back about 18 inches on either side from that original box. And we're proposing to sort of clad it in a different material, white cedar sidewall shingles. And really the idea here is to sort of make it distinct and, to be very respectful of that original form. And you can actually see from the material notes here that we are proposing a high quality project. And next slide, please. slide 19. Here we go. And finally, these are, showing what is the proposed footprint, floor plan layout on the left side versus the existing floor plan on the right side. And really what we're trying to do here is clearly indicate those areas that we are proposing to remove. On the right, all of those hatched exterior walls, as Aaron spoke, not original to the original structure, and we're proposing to remove those. And on the left side, trying to clearly show what is going to be that new addition on the back of this, and how we're sort of setting it back from the sides of that original structure. Again, trying to respect that original box. And I think with that, I will hand it back to Attorney Mead.
Thank you, Scott. So I think we'd love to hear any questions that the commission has at this time. We think that we have given you a lot of information and historical information relative to the house, the barn and its significance, and how we propose to do the demolition, and quite frankly, preservation for a much longer period of time of the original structure. So we would welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you. I see Patricia's got a hand up. Patricia?
Yes, I have a few questions. So the first question is, what is the percentage of demolition that will be done, and why was it not calculated in the application?
Because doesn't have to be calculated, because it meets the definition of demolition because we are moving it. If we were not moving it and we were taking off those exterior walls, we would calculate the amount of demolition to see if we fell underneath the 25%. But it doesn't matter here because the mere act of moving it is considered demolition.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. I was just wondering, in addition to counting as demolition, what percentage of, how big are the additions? I see in my notes, something says 768 square feet, and I don't know if that's the footprint of the existing historic structure, or is that the footprint of the original building with the additions and that 10-foot addition on the side. I'm trying to understand, what is the size of the barn now, and then what will the size of the renovated structure be, and what percentage of it will be there still,
Okay, so I was entering the first part of the question, or at least one part of your question, is why we didn't do a calculation of the 25%.
Yeah.
So that's why we didn't do the calculation. But if I don't know if Scott, you have those numbers, at least the footprint off the top of your head. I don't know if I can.
Well, on slide 19, if those are to the same scale, at least you could get an idea, because it shows the plan view of the new and the proposed and the existing kind of side by side. I assume they would be to the same scale, right?
I did have some dimensions on there if we can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, zoom in there.
Yeah, so Patricia, the existing one is to the right and the proposal is to the left. So you can kind of get an idea that.
I understand. Yeah. I can get an idea if I study it for a long time.
Right.
I was asking if the numbers were available. Okay. So the next thing I was wondering about is, so how many feet from the house is the carriage barn now? And then how many feet away will it be when it's relocated to the back corner of the lot? Because we can't see it from the pictures, when we're standing in front of the house. It's very prominent. It's very close to the house, as such structures are. So I'm just wondering what's the distance from the house according to the site plan. Again, I could, zoom out and do the calculations, but I just thought it'd be better if you could just let me know so I can take my notes.
I think in the site plan, I mean, it don't have an exact measurement on there, but it, is somewhere, it looks like in the 15, 18 feet range from the existing back of the house. And, we're clearly moving it more than sort of 100 feet away from that.
Okay, some of my other questions were answered by the cupola question, I guess. I thought that was conjectural. I think it's great that you had the historic photo to show that that was there. But the other question is about photographs. Like, you know, we were always hoping to get photographs of adjacent buildings and the settings, and I think those photos are particularly important to me because it's next to Ken Widmer's house, and you know that house has the most comprehensive, meticulous PR I've ever seen. So it would have been nice to see it in relation to adjacent buildings and the setting. I wish the developer had offered those, but I guess those, most of my concerns were about the size, the percentage demo, and then how far away it will be compared to what it is now. So I'll let others ask questions. I think that's it for me.
Okay, and I just did a very crude measurement, Patricia. It looks like it is about roughly 100 feet from that closest corner of the proposed garage to that corner of the house. Basically what it is, they took that 10-foot setback that you see between the existing garage and the property lines. Oh, there's a 10-foot, and that's about 11 on my screen. It's about 11 millimeters, and it's about 110 millimeters from the house of the thing. So it's roughly 100 feet. Anyway, I had a quick question. Just jumping in on that show, this existing slide we're looking at is a good one to ask it. I also noticed that one of the things that's nice about the existing configuration, by configuration I mean the relationship between the barn and the house, is that you kind of see the relationship between those two structures. There's the house, there's the barn or carriage house, whatever, and they're obviously a set, if you will. Would it have been possible to position the the proposed barn kind of straight back? In other words, where you've got that driveway going back to sort of a turnaround area, have the barn still facing the street, still visible from the street, complementing the house, just kind of further back. And hopefully, consider what I'm saying, it would be kind of, you know, looks like you still would have adequate setbacks and so on that you could still achieve putting it there. Was there any special reason why you couldn't do that?
No, I think it was, Mr. Chairman, it was something we considered, but we felt pretty strongly that it was best located in the back left-hand corner because it does allow for a better view corridor to that back right corner from the house. So again, we thought that this gave us the most flexibility to do something with the backyard.
I have a concern with regards to the backyard. If you're going to actually reposition the barn where it is, it looks like about a third of the yard is going to be blacktop and not garden.
Yeah, do you understand Mark's question? I think that was Mark Sindron. He was saying that on this proposed drawing, that where it says it's not quite big enough for me to make out what it says there. Is the driveway, is that all blacktop? That quite extensive drive? That's what he's talking about there? Or is that, you know?
Yeah, to answer the question, we're not, you know, quite honestly, we're not exactly sure what we're doing back there in terms of what that driveway is. It could be a number of different things, which could be part of a more comprehensive landscaping plan back here. You know, it could be pavers, it could be crushed stone. You know, what might even be nice is that maybe it was, you know, depending on the landscaping plan, it could be a simple cart path with some stone, but we're not quite sure yet.
Mark, was your concern mostly around things like drainage and permeability, or appearance, or both, or?
Well, it was following your thought about the relationship of the house and the barn, and the fact that they do seem to have sort of a purpose in their position. The repositioning all the way at the end of the property on the left seems to me to not make a lot of sense and allow for a huge area of the garden to be taken up by a driveway. But if the plans are not set yet, that may be a moot concern.
All right, thanks, Mark. Who else would like to opine on this? Any other comments from the board here? Christopher, I see a hand.
Yeah, I just, you guys beat me to the punch on that, but I just would echo the same. I would echo what Mark said, which is echoing what Glenn said. And maybe just make the case that, as I'm looking up on the streetscape here on Google Maps, and you can, sort of straight on, there's a benefit to the street, to the community, if you will, I think, to see the barn.
Yeah.
As opposed to tucking it behind, and then Mark making sense and Glenn's making sense that you're actually losing backyard, it seems like. So I'd like to see maybe rethink. I don't think I have any issues with the moving the barn, maybe, or even if it had to be tucked back a little bit further, certainly preserve it. I don't know what the door looks like. The door that exists now looks, I don't know if it's original. It definitely looks old to me. And I don't know what the new door is going to look like. Is going to be an updated sort of thing. I'd like to maybe keep that part of it consistent with what it is right now. And I understand all the engineering and all the construction aspects of it that need to be altered. But yeah, so, I mean, if I'm on the sidewalk or I'm walking down the street, I can see the barn. I can appreciate the barn, and we don't always see that. It's not a garage. Right, we're making the assumption here that it's going to be restored to something that's a little bit more original in a sense. So we lose that if it's tucked behind. And I know that the homeowner maybe has an advantage, but I'm not sure. Again, if you add up the square feet, I don't know if the homeowner's in the audience, but it would make more sense to me to have more of that backyard. I suppose. So,
And I'll ask Mr. Sturgis perhaps to comment on the doors, because I don't know the answer to that myself. I don't think what's there today is original, but I'll let him comment on that. And I'd also like the board to, I haven't heard anyone express problems with demolishing the newer parts that were added on that are in poor condition. So I'd like to hear also
Are we
about that.
Or are we still asking questions? And I'm uncertain of what's happening, because I have a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I didn't want to get ahead of people who had questions. Or
I would say we're deliberating.
Oh, okay. We're deliberating. Okay.
Okay. It's combo package, so to speak, because there are also some questions like the one right now. There's a question on the floor that I'm hoping maybe Mr. Sturgis can shed some light on the doors, and then we can certainly go back to Patricia if you have some other thoughts.
Other thoughts.
Sure. Just if I could jump, by door I mean not the two garage doors that we see in front of us, but the
the old door with the old hinges. Oh, okay.
Not the two red doors. No.
Okay.
Oh, the person door? Is that what you're talking about, Chris? The person door?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I think there may be somebody raising their hand. Mr. Bartlett, who's the current occupant of the house and whose family has owned this house for generations. And I think he might have something to say.
Okay, I don't see any
Hello.
attendee list.
Oh, he's on Mr. Ragusa's laptop. There he is.
Oh, okay. Okay, that explains it. All right. Okay, well, we're a little bit out of order here. Why don't I do this to make it semi-official or a little bit better organized? Why don't we temporarily abate or hold off on our deliberations, and I'll open a brief public comment period so that Mr. Bartlett can make a comment. Why don't you go ahead, Mr. Bartlett?
Good evening. My name is William Merrill Bartlett. I'm a lifelong resident of Newburyport. My family purchased the property in 1863, specifically my great-great-grandfather, Henry Merrill Jr. And the reason I selected, I just want to say preliminarily that the reason I selected Chris and Holly Ragusa, who are my neighbors, I've known them for 10 years, and they're outstanding people, outstanding family people. And they're great builders, and I feel that the property is in wonderful hands with them. I am, to be honest, not married, don't have children, and I was looking when I sold the property for people who I felt would care for it, be there for the property. My family was in the property for over 150 years, and I think Holly and Chris Ragusa are and will be outstanding stewards for the property, and I'm overjoyed that they've taken on the project of caring for the property. Specifically with reference to the barn itself, I played in the barn in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up. My father did the same in the 1920s and 1930s. My father was born in 1919 at the Anna Jakes Hospital. My family goes back to the 1630s. The Merrills and the Bartletts arrived with the first settlers in the 1630s at the Lower Green in Newbury. And as I say, the property was purchased in 1863, right in the middle of the Civil War, when various family members were away serving from Newburyport in the Civil War. I don't know if he pulled a fast one on the family members when he did that, but with reference to the barn itself, it's important, I think, to know that my father was born in 1919. Always, when I was a kid, would refer to the sort of the new and the old sections of the barn, and the old barn he referred to which was the original barn, which we've talked about tonight, and the additions on the right and on the back were the quote unquote new barn. And he differentiated between the two. My guess is that the wood on the addition on the right and on the back was frankly new wood when he was a kid in the 1920s playing in the barn. I agree with Chris and his team with reference to the renovation plan that they have. I think it makes perfect sense. I'm overjoyed that the original barn, or as my father would call it, the old barn, or which was in effect the barn within the barn, which is to say the left-hand and middle section of the barn, as you look at the barn, the part of the barn that has an actual foundation under it, will be preserved. The idea of it being put on a new foundation, a new slab, and being preserved is just, I think, wonderful. And I completely and wholly support it.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Chair, I would like to just carry on with one comment that Mr. Bartlett made. You note he said that many of his family members and others in town, of course, went to fight in the Civil War. And one of the things that we neglected to tell you is that the cupola, which Scott has designed, will hold an original bell that was in the old cupola, which used to ring when the soldiers came back from the war. That still exists on the property, and it will be rehung within the cupola on the barn.
With a rope descending to someone to ring it, I presume.
I can't tell you that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Mead, and thank you very much, Mr. Bartlett. Is there anyone else that would, as long as we're, if Mr. Sturgis is there and would like to make a comment, you're not required to. Would you like to make any comment regarding your views on what you're proposing to do here?
Sure. Just as a follow-up to the group, we're going to save 100% of the original structure, which was about 432 square feet. The addition to the right was about 180 square feet, and the one to the back, I think, has evolved over time, even later and bigger than it should have been originally. So you've got the original structure saved 100% and a small addition put back on. That's about 200 square feet based on the plan. So you have about 600 or 700 square feet of authentic structure on a solid foundation. So I just want to make a point of clarification on that. And secondly, I wanted to further clarify that we are moving this barn intact, that we're not taking it apart. We're going to move it back onto the property as a unit once the appendages are removed. we can safely do that with steel and jacks and cribbings and so forth, and move it directly onto the new foundation once the foundation is in place. So I just wanted to talk to distinguish that process with this group. So that allows us to keep that wonderful gable end sheathing intact, the original door to the left intact. Obviously, the two garage doors in red in this picture are much later added roll-up doors and not original. The original door was larger, and that's what's reflected in Scott's design. And finally, I recommended strongly to Chris that they move the building back and make it a useful adaptive reuse. You know, he was wondering whether or not it was worth saving this barn at all, and I convinced him to do so based on that early timber frame, which is very clearly visible in the original part of the barn. And I just wanted to reflect on Christopher's comment about not being able to see the barn. As you drive down High Street, no one goes slow enough to see this barn now. But as you're walking down High Street, I will say that you could see the barn and a beautiful yard if it were moved to the position that is proposed. So I strongly recommended that position to them for that purpose, because currently the elongated barn with the definitive addition most lately added completely blocks what is an absolutely beautiful viewscape from High Street to the back of the yard. The barn being placed on the property where it's proposed gives some privacy for its adaptive reuse, but actually aligns with a beautiful viewscape from High Street to the buildings and the huge trees that you can sort of see in this photograph. But there are beautiful trees that are not on the plan that are going to be retained to really create an authentic viewscape yard that is rare and hard to come by in Newburyport. So I felt that it was important to try and get the barn back further for its best use. And let's face it, if we're not adaptively using these buildings for their best use, we are less likely to save them. But also to open up that yard to really shine. So I just wanted to make those few points, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the structure that you may have.
Okay, so technically we're still in that public comment period. I may have misspoken. I was wondering if Mr. Ragusa himself, that was who I meant to refer to as saying he's not required to make any comment, but before I close the public comment period, wanted to invite him to make any comment if he would like. So Mr. Ragusa, would you like to say anything about this?
I would. Good evening, Chris Ragusa I live at 278 High Street, and my wife and I own the house at 276 High Street, which we felt very fortunate to have the opportunity to purchase because of, you know, primarily the structure, and just the yard is really something that on our side of High Street, you just don't have anymore in Newburyport. There's almost like a small forest in the back that we're really proud of, and that we were so nervous that if the house was sold, we felt that, the trees would likely be cut down. We even went to tried to talk to Bill initially about buying, enough land to save the trees. And fortunately, it all came together that we were able to buy the entire property. And, Bill is still living there, and he can live there as long as he likes. But now we have an opportunity to really save it. So, when we looked at this barn, and I've always loved old barns and done several projects with Aaron. Him and I have just recently moved a beautiful structure on Strawberry Bank in Portsmouth together. This barn, I think saving that original structure and creating a small, carriage type workshop on the back of that beautiful lot in that forested area is just something that, it's really a once in a lifetime opportunity to do. And I'm really excited to be able to be part of it. So I guess I just wanted to say that this, this is not a development project. I'm not a developer. I know someone mentioned that. I'm a builder, and that's what I've done all my life and all I'll ever do. So this is a project for me and my family. So I think that's all I have to say. Do you have any questions for me in general?
Just that you confused me with one thing. You said that Bill's going to continue to live there, Mr. Bartlett. Are you planning to at some point move into the house? Not that it's relevant particularly,
Are
but
you
just
asking
curious.
Bill or myself?
I'm asking Mr. Ragusa.
Oh, you know, I can't answer that honestly. I just haven't thought about it. I just did a major renovation on my home next door, so I'm really not looking that far down the road right now with it. And plus, I really want Bill to live there as long as he wants, and he doesn't have any plans at the moment to leave, so we're happy with a good neighbor.
All right, sounds like an interesting arrangement. Okay, then I'm going to formally close the public comment period and go back to our panel. I know Patricia had some comments to make, and anyone else was able to too. So why don't I go ahead and start with you, Patricia?
Yeah, thank you. I'm conflicted on this, and I invite my fellow commissioners to change my mind in either direction. I'm starting from, the public's preservation perspective rather than the preservation of someone involved in a project. And I look at the fact that the intent of the DCOD ordinance is to prevent even the partial tearing down or the moving from one portion of a lot to another of an historic building. And so as Mark and some others were explaining, the carriage barn would go from prominent in its current location to visible, right, in the backyard, but really more not part of the public streetscape anymore, part of, the private backyard. And I like how prominent it is, just like the carriage barn at 24 Broad and 195 High. These sort of ancillary structures are great evidence of the social economic life. In this case, when Merrill owned it, he did have tenants who used the carriage barn for their trade. There was Paul Lunt made felt shoes there. You can look in the city directory and the Daily News and see advertisements for his business there. So those additions were, to create the workshop space that Mr. Ragusa just referred to, workshop space. It's great. So they weren't just, idle storage spaces, but really utilitarian spaces, a lot of times rented out to tradesmen or retail. I thought it was funny in the Daily News, it mentioned that Walter Bartlett, who lived there in 1926, he was the secretary of the Newburyport Citizens Alliance to support prohibition. So then I started wondering if anyone went out to sneak a drink in the barn ever. We don't have many of these structures left. This is a rare one that's listed as contributory along with the house on the district data sheets. Very unusual. And the city's starting to work on updating its inventory of historic properties, partly to document buildings like this one. And Boston has lost so many of them, right? The Boston Preservation Alliance has said, these sort of carriage houses, they document neighborhood development, the everyday life of people, the history of travel, and they have a lot of architectural charm. I also looked at the standards for rehabilitation and the secretary's standards for the building site. And as you can imagine, the secretary recommends against removing or relocating buildings and destroying the relationship between buildings to one another and substantially changing their features so that their character is diminished. I like the simplicity of this historic building. And I feel like the garage that's depicted in the proposed elevations is a very different structure. And I wonder if couldn't more of the simplicity be retained, the sort of curved corners of the doors. Can the hayloft door be retained? Can the real barn or cottage house look remain rather than the metal roof over the entryway? And there's more stuff that I could look at in the standards, but it sounds like the barn is being moved to where it's being moved, as preference and convenience. Obviously, the ideal preservation outcome for me would be that it's, moved and then moved back onto a new foundation and that it stays there. On the other hand, I don't want the city to lose the barn, in its entirety, either because of ongoing neglect or an expired demo delay. And I acknowledge that Mr. Sturgis is really the gold standard, and that if he says he's going to fix the framing to guarantee its continued existence for decades to come, then that's a positive preservation outcome as well. And barns and outbuildings were moved from time to time. So I could be, convinced that moving it is acceptable, although it's really sad for the public to use it. Being able to peek at it in the back of the lot, it just isn't the same as having it where it is. I think it strikes me as a project that's more like losing the historic carriage barn in the streetscape. But then the trade-off is you preserve the vintage framing, but then, it's in a private backyard. And I think the design is not entirely coherent with the simplicity of this. It seems like it looks very contemporary. So somebody help me make up my mind. Somebody on the commission, please.
Quick question for anyone on the applicant side there, maybe Attorney Mead knows. Do you have a date on the ZBA's calendar yet?
No, because we're not permitted to file until after 21 days that we have filed with Historic Commission, and that runs this week.
I see. That just sounds like that. I know that's we were supposed to submit a report in 20 days. So that sounds like what that's all about.
So there's two different timeframes, and Andy can speak to this. But in order to the whole idea is in order to give the commission the opportunity to comment prior to the zoning board's time period by which they have to hear it.
Right.
The ordinance requires us not to submit and file with the ZBA until after we have filed 21 days with the Historic Commission.
Right.
That's correct.
Yep. Okay, thanks. And that expires, what'd you say, when does that expire?
I'd have to look at my calendar,
okay.
Mr. Richards, but it's this week.
Okay.
So my friends, Joe,
Mark, anyone, yeah.
Because I'm very divided on it. It's
I totally sympathize with you, Patricia, because as far as the mixed feelings, because it's one of those things where we've heard from Mrs. Sturgis before. You remember on the other property, other side of High Street and down a bit, and I noticed that particular barn has been dismantled. I assume that's being worked on. But anyway, the only real negative, in my personal opinion, is the location. But I don't. I agree with you. There's no question that the standards are that it's things are, even things that were quote unquote later added when they're that old, they become historic in their own right. But then you have things like condition and compatibility and so on, and often it's the condition. And we've seen a number of cases where under the category of they don't build them like they used to, right? The original one was very well built, but the later additions not so much, and they really are not particularly adding to the or actually, according to Mr. Sturgis, actively hurting the original structure, which I think my sense is that we would probably all agree we would love to be able to keep the original timber framed carriage house or barn, whatever you want to call it.
I just, I worry that, you walk by in 5 years and, we're saying, oh, great, the view corridor is preserved. It's not really historically where a carriage barn is anymore, but we did preserve the timber framing.
Yeah.
You walk by and there's a fence and a swimming pool and you kind of go, oh yeah, remember when that was the carriage house. So I wish somebody else would help me, someone else on the commission, I mean.
Yeah, well.
Andy, could you just go to the, I'm sorry, I just want to put the photo up for slide 11, because I think it, just a perspective on the original, and then I'll be quiet. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought it would be good to have slide 11. Thank you.
Yeah, and that big old tree is gone. So anyone on the board? Chris, welcome. Joe, anyone have a comment?
I'll throw in.
I want to see hands.
This is Peter. I'm unmuted. like Patricia, I'm conflicted on some fronts on this. The structure needs to be saved, and in its current condition, on its current foundation, it's going to continue to deteriorate. So if we have an opportunity to do something about that, we should do something about that and allow the owner to do something about that. And certainly they have the right team to do it. That being said, it doesn't need to change as dramatically in character as it is shown in the proposed elevations. While that's an attractive building, it does, this image that we're looking at right now, that really contributes to the aspect of this property. Now, does the building need to stay right there? I don't know. Should it go all the way to the back of the lot? When I first looked at it, I thought, okay, that's not bad. And I take what's being said. I think it was Mr. Sturgis said that, or maybe it was Scott Brown, who said that you still can see it. There's a pretty good shot. And if you look at the slide that has the Google Maps image, there's certainly plenty of room to see it all the way back there if you're walking down the street. But it does significantly change the character of the property in doing that. I suspect all that blacktop is so that there is plenty of space for parking, because this really is barely going to be a garage. It can serve as a garage, but all that blacktop is places for cars, and the structure itself is going to be the workshop or whatever. So I'm not entirely sure of where to go other than to say, move it, okay, far, no, and change the character of the building as dramatically as I'm looking at. While I like those drawings, I don't think it's necessary to redefine it. It is a beautiful building in its simplicity, yeah. And we do lose that hayloft door. We do lose the window between the carriage door and the person door. We do move the carriage door and the person door closer together. So it just, that's a full makeover. The only thing that remains really is the cupola, and that's new. I do appreciate the idea of the historic bell going in it. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, and I do see Mark and Joe have hands up before and I think I'll go to Mark next. But before I do, I just want to clarify one thing for the board here, that we do not issue the permit on this either way. There's no demo delay per se. What happens is what they need is a permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. What's called a special permit under the DCOT ordinance. And our job is to inform the ZBA of our opinion, so we can make our recommendations. And they could be things like, oh, we like it as is on one extreme, to we hate it and don't change anything on the other extreme, and everything in the middle to, what we like and don't like about it. So what I'm taking notes here as to all your comments as to what you find positive, what you find negative, what your concerns are, so that we can possibly put this into a report. We may have to do a situation where I create a draft, and then at the next meeting, review the draft and see if anyone, if everyone is good with it, and then send it on to the ZBA. All right. Having said that, Mark, what did you want to say?
So while I applaud the efforts to salvage what appears to be a historically significant structure, what also makes it significantly historic is its location. And I'm having a real great deal of trouble understanding the thought process that goes behind trying to move this barn to that far location in the back. I could understand it if it meant a logistical type of maneuver to move the barn, rebuild the foundation, put the barn back. But to move it all the way back there, to me, makes absolutely no sense, given the lovely garden and so on and so forth and trees. To go hide it in back there, to me, is really a shame. I think that barn deserves to be seen in relationship to the house, from High Street, even though people may be driving fast. There are a lot of people who walk and who bicycle and who do enjoy this. And so I do feel very strongly that this barn should, if any way possible, be moved maybe a little further back, but not certainly in that corner of the yard as has been described.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And Joe, I think you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Peter and Mark have just said. I feel the same. There's something just very strange about this project, and I can't really understand why you would move it to the back of the site if it is actually currently serving as a garage. So there's something about and I can't put my finger on it, the discussion about use and then adaptive reuse. Okay, if it were clearly, it's a different use, because I don't think anybody would logically place their garage at the back of a site and then walk back to their house every day. That doesn't make any sense. So, okay, it's a workshop. I mean, it's not a barn. There's no animals there. It's a workshop. Okay, so you're going to move it away from the house because maybe there's, noisy equipment. I don't know. I don't know if that really is a part of what our commentary should be. We've been steered to really just talk about it as a historical structure and the infinite detail that goes with the disassembly and reassembly of that elsewhere on the site. And okay, that's fine, but I totally agree that there's been no talk about the ensemble of the buildings, including the house itself, which is actually in need of some stewardship. That's what we're talking about. The main house, which faces High Street, it needs some scraping and painting. And, I understand that you can't do everything at once, but it's just, again, it's odd that this particular barn, quote unquote, has been targeted to be relocated elsewhere on the site and put down a lot of blacktop. So I'm going to go, since I don't really know what to add to the conversation, I'm confused by the project. I'm going to go with what Mark just said, that really, I don't see any reason. I think it's really important that the ensemble of the buildings remain intact, that there is the way it faces High Street is very important. It's the ensemble of the house and its associated, its accessory carriage building. And I think that's what I want to go with in terms of my own understanding of what it is and what it should be. So thank you.
Well, thanks, fellas. Thank you.
Yeah,
hearing from everyone.
Yeah, and the only thing I would disagree with on that, Joe, is that the relationship between the house and the barn was at least mentioned, and that was fact. I think that was my comment, because there's a story there, right? There's a historical story as to especially if it looks like a carriage house, back to the day, as there's only relatively few carriage houses left. Most of them are with the grand mansions, so to speak, on High Street and that sort of thing. This is quite in that category, although it's quite a nice house. I certainly don't mean to disparage it for Mr. Bartlett or Mr. Ragusa. That's not my intention at all. But anyway, there's a story between, here's the house where the people lived, here's the carriage house, AKA in this case barn, but I think of it more as a carriage house where, they're either the carriage and later vehicles may be kept or kids played or whatever. And, they have a certain relationship. And sounds like just about all of us are having, scratching our heads as to why it needs to be moved so far away. And even if, in a sense, the logic behind that isn't as important as what our concern is, that, well, why would you want to disturb or destroy that relationship, that to use Joe's word, ensemble, the relationship between the residents and the accessory building. So I didn't hear anyone really opposed to the idea of doing the salvage work. I use the term salvage. What I mean is the work of removing the deteriorating later additions and restoring the original barn. Although I would agree with, I think it was Peter that said it, that the new the proposed design seems a little more grand than the original, and there's something rather charming about the original. I can see maybe going a little bit, maybe a little more trim or something, but that original design is perfect, is really period appropriate. It's how it was designed, and it's I don't know. So
Yeah,
yeah.
Glenn, if you look at them, the carriage barns around town, they're so simple so that they don't compete visually with the ornate houses. In fact, in their simplicity, they dramatize the details, the features of the house.
Yeah, the main feature they typically would have is the doorway might have a rounded arch with a keystone, so that the top is, instead of being a straight lintel, will be like a nice rounded arch for the opening to the carriage house, whatever. But we digress a little bit. Joe, your hand is still up. Did you want to say something more, or is that just?
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I clarify some things with the board just so we understand the comments, because certainly we've heard everything that you've just said. But I want to, as the new owners, kind of wait and look and see and think about how they're going to reuse this property and incorporate the use of the barn, which really isn't the size for a garage necessarily, to one of the earlier points, but needs to be saved because it's an integral part of the property. But how do you use it so that it doesn't get in the way in the use of the rest of the property, which is what we're really trying to figure out here. So with that, and having heard that, to just kind of clarify so that we can go back and listen to your comments and potentially make adjustments before we go to the ZBA. I didn't hear any real objections to the preservation of the original structure and removing those later added additions. I think that's an accurate statement. I hear Scott hears your comments related to the design. We hear that. And then the question would be, really there's a pinch point for, if you will, modern living, which is what I think that Aaron was getting at, that it's just not going to work right where it is today. But we certainly hear what you say about the relationship between the barn and the house. But so if you balance that, and we hear that, obviously most of the commission members, or all the commission members, have a concern about moving it to the back left corner. If it were to be moved back, further to the right corner, so it would be more of a straight back, not from where the original structure is, because the original structure is actually tucked behind the house, right? Because there's an addition that's to the right of it. But if we're moved back, let's say you took the driveway and you just moved it straight back towards the rear of the property, so it opens up the middle of the property more, but still, as you look down High Street, it's still in the same line, so to speak. And some of you said, well, you can move it back some, you can move it back a little bit, but I'm just trying to gauge what you're kind of where you are with that. Is that clear as mud? Somebody's muted, maybe.
Take myself off mute here. No, it isn't. It's much clearer than mud. Thank you, Attorney Mead. In that, based on how these things work, my sense is that you're trying to get a good and more as clear as you can sense of the board as to, what are we okay with versus, what are we not so okay with, and what are we definitely dead set against, to sum it up. And I think you kind of summed it up pretty well. I think the one I didn't hear any serious objection to what I called the salvage job. It's really more of a restoration would be a more appropriate word,
Right.
which I think we'll agree that what that consists of is removing the deteriorated later additions and restoring the timber frame barn. And then you also commented out, you heard what we said about, the design maybe being a little bit grander than we would have expected. So the one that we're concerned about, I think you mentioned what you called a pinch point. I assume you mean, especially with the existing size of the structure between the house and the barn, and between the barn and the property line, there are two relatively narrow passages, but right on the property
Right.
line side, a little over 10 feet, between the house and the barn, 12 to 15, something like that. So they're looking to get a little more space there. And it sounds like one of the ideas that you're kind of toying with is, of course, with the later addition on the right removed, the barn will be narrower, only about 20 some odd feet.
I think it's 18 feet. Yep.
Okay, 18. Yeah, I'm thinking of the one on Park Street. Sorry. And having let's call it the right-hand side, I believe that's kind of the southeastern side, have that be about a similar setback as it is today, so
Yeah,
that
something like that.
It opens up that so-called pinch point between the house and the barn. There'd be a lot more room there, and especially if it's moved back a bit. Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Right. And so the key word there is a bit, right?
You want to quantify it, eh?
So really we're looking,
Yeah.
again, moving it back further towards the rear of the property, but on that same line that you just described.
Yeah.
Peter had his hand up. Glenn, maybe Peter was going to comment on this topic. I'm not sure.
Well,
nope.
No, I did. I'm just having some computer issues and I've lost all my images, but here they're coming back. Can we get that image back up, Andy, that showed the house and the carriage house together?
You're talking about one of the historical ones, Peter?
Yeah.
Or current?
Yeah, one of the historical ones.
Yeah, I think it was probably 13, either 13 or 14. I think 13 was.
I mean,
most.
That's the image.
Okay.
Okay, hang on a second. Everything is jumbled up on my screens here now.
Sure.
Okay, there we go. So that's the money shot for me. That's the image that helps me decide what I think works here. And everything that Attorney Mead just said, rings of compromise and flexibility, which is good. So, I just want to say specifically, moving it somewhat from its current position, maybe a little bit back, certainly off to the side once the additions are removed, makes a difference. The one thing that I would say very specifically, while I admire the design of the new facade, if you will, I don't like it applied to this building. I'd like to see this building look the way it does in this picture without the addition. So, move it somewhat back, maybe move it off to the right, open up that space between the two buildings a bit to make that a functional space. And that I would be totally
right
behind.
And just that we all kind of understand what we mean by, and I'll try my best, Attorney Mead, to quantify, a bit here. So if you can imagine looking at this photo, there are two garage doors. So now imagine that the one on the right is gone, and we're back to the original front width of the original barn. We'll use the term barn regardless of whether it's a carriage house or barn. Now take that and slide it to the right, so it's approximately where the right-hand side is now, right? So now you've moved the whole thing over probably about, I don't know, maybe 12 feet or so. I don't know what the width of that addition is, but it's probably in that ballpark. So you've reduced that so-called pinch point by 12 feet. And then if you take another, move it, I think you could afford to move it back, I don't know, 12, 15 feet without losing that relationship with the house. But I'd be interested to hear if people like Joe, Patricia, and Peter agree that if that's too much or not.
Well, Chair Richards,
yeah,
there's a technical issue here too. I
Sure.
mean, I think ideally you would build a foundation and move it once and you wouldn't move it back. But that's not to say they can't jack it up and build a new foundation under it. I think. I don't know. There's some technical wizardry that has to occur probably once they strip off the existing light frame additions to the original timber structure. So, but I think that if they wanted to build a separate foundation, say immediately behind it, I think I would be okay with that. Just if that's a facilitator for getting the work done, that would be okay with me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that we'll certainly listen to all the comments of the board. We really have some functionality issues. I think also, when we draw it and take a look at it, we're gonna, you're gonna have a better view of it, quite frankly. If it moves over and back, you're gonna have a better view of it. So that better view may help or aid in the relationship, even if it's back further, maybe not back to the very corner, but maybe back more than 10 or 15 feet, right? So I think that we're gonna need to take a look at it, do some perspectives. We certainly appreciate the comments from the commission, and we'll try to address those to the extent possible. So you can put all your comments obviously in your advisory report, and what we'll do is try to address them to the extent possible when we go to the ZBA.
Okay, so you've kind of answered the question that I was going to ask, which was going to be, should I hold off drafting that? But it sounds like no, I should go ahead and write up all these things we've discussed tonight. I've got a pretty good idea of what that is. I probably will still want to review it with this board, and when we meet again in 2 weeks, Attorney Mead, just to make sure, because there was a lot of discussion. I want to make sure. I think I've got a pretty good handle on it, but I want to, be sure I've got that right. And then, it sounds like you don't plan to come back to us, but we'll take everything you've heard tonight. Which I'm not going to add anything new in the report, certainly. So, and you can take that to the ZBA will have that, and they'll also have whatever you and Scott and Mr. Ragusa, whatever, are able to do to address those. Does that sound fair?
Yes, that would be a good process.
Okay. All right, then. I guess just as a.
So Glenn, you're gonna write this up, and we're gonna.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable reviewing it with you at our next meeting. But yes, what I plan to do, my usual procedure, I'll do a draft. It'll be pretty much presentable form. In other words, if everyone's good with it, it can go as it is pretty much. It won't be like a rough draft, capturing all these opinions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, etc. And I should be able to, send that, or either, post it, send it to you, whatever. We're not able to deliberate on it outside the meeting, but you can at least see get it before the next meeting, so you can look it over, and we can, at the next meeting, we can expeditiously say, yep, looks good, or you need to change X, Y, Z.
Can I make a request that you, as I'm sure you will, capture the sort of diversity of opinion about how far back?
Sure.
Because I think if people, next time you're around, just walk over and look through Ken Widmer's fence or whatever. It sounds like some people were saying 12 to 15 feet is okay, and some other people were saying ideally it'd be there, maybe a foot or two back.
Right.
It seems like that's the issue that's the least resolved.
Yeah, and
there's not really consensus about.
Yeah, and it is a little hard to we're kind of guessing to a certain extent, right? Because as Ms. Mead pointed out, it'll be easier to see it. Like, we don't have a rendering what all of those actually look like,
Well, we did a photo, we don't really know what things look like.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, but I think the key thing is, you know, as I've said, and Joe and others have said, that we don't want to lose the essential gist of the relationship. You know, what's the word I'm looking for? The conversation, if you will, between the residents and the carriage house. Okay. And I'd like to end this particular deliberation. May I do so? Anyone have anything they feel they would like to say? If not, going once, going twice. Okay, so we'll end that particular deliberation and I'll get to work with my writing. Just as a little irrelevant aside, and thank you for your presentations and comments, both Attorney Mead and Mr. Sturgis and Mr. Ragusa and Mr. Bartlett and Mr. Brown. Thank you all for your contributions to the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
While Andy is queuing up the agenda again, I think we only have a couple of quick things. So I'll just mention, you know, I've been trying to clear out old papers and stuff. And one of the things I ran into was my college application essay. When I applied to college, this would be 1968.
Probably sell that to someone.
Yeah, really. My mom, the English teacher, I have to admit, did help me a bit, mostly in the way of constructive feedback and use of typewriter. Anyway, so minutes from the 22nd of April. I know I took a look at them. They look good to me. Did anyone have any issue with them, or is there a motion to approve them? Do I hear a motion to approve the
This
minutes?
is Peter. I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And
Mark, I'll
seconded.
second the motion.
Thank you, Mark. So Malcolm, approval of minutes?
I wasn't there, so
Oh, that's
I don't.
right. I'm sorry. You were R for recusal. So sorry, I forgot.
Okay.
Mark, you were here.
Yes.
Approve. Okay, Chris Fay was absent. He's Peter McNamee. You
Yes.
were here, right? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Joe Morgan was here, right?
Yes.
Okay. Patricia was absent. She's R, and the chair was here, and he is in favor of approving the draft, so that they are officially approved. The draft minutes, that is. And by the way, on that note, Andy, I may need to refer to this discussion we just had. Will someone be able to post the video relatively soon if I need to refer to it?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Diane will typically do it tomorrow morning, so.
Oh, great. That'd
shouldn't
be
go long, but-
wonderful. Not sure I'll get to it that fast, but that'd be great. Okay. As far as updates from the chair, the only update I'll just mention, I sent you all an email. Diane was kind enough to post a link to that map I made mention of at our prior meeting. I'm not really asking you to do anything about it, but you should at least take a look and just to see what we're up against in terms of the sheer quantity of stuff. Boy, in a way, it's a that's an expression, something of riches. Anyway, when you've got so much of something, that becomes a negative thing. We have so
An
many
embarrassment of riches.
Thank you, Peter. We've got so many wonderful old properties, and of course a few unwonderful old properties. But so we are working on it. Andy, is there any update from you as far as working on the request for proposals on that?
No, we will circle back with you and Patricia on that.
Okay. Okay, so no, I don't have any further updates. I think we are ready to take a vote on adjournment unless someone has anything else they want to include before we adjourn.
And make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mark. That was you, Mark, right, Mark?
Indeed.
Okay. Okay, is that seconded?
I second it. This is Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, we'll go through the roll. Malcolm, now you can vote on this one.
I think we should adjourn.
Okay, I'm glad you've given it very deliberate thought. Mark Centrone.
I think alike.
Okay, very good. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Okay, I know I like to not stay up too late. Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan
Yes.
and Patricia Pecknick.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. But before we officially adjourn, I will say to you, Mr. Fay, I know you don't like meetings to go wicked late. You can, if it's any consolation, the ZBA meeting, which I attended nearly all of, went past midnight the other night. Okay, folks. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you all for your contributions. I really appreciate the diversity of opinion. I appreciate all your input. I think we've got a really good mix of folks with a lot of interesting and different views, and I really appreciate hearing from all of you. So thank you all for your participation, and I bid you all a good night.
All right.
Good night, all.
And thank you, Chair Richards.
Thank
You're
you.
Likewise,
welcome.
yes.
Thank you, Glenn.
Good night.
Good night.